Ready to break free from algorithms, vanity PR, and money-sucking ads? My name's Larissa Worstick, and I've learned in 7 years of jewelry marketing that content is the crown jewel. My agency, Joya, takes a holistic approach, leading with laser-focused storytelling, impactful content creation, and strategic content distribution. This method has worked for the solopreneur as well as the multi-million-dollar company, and now I'm sharing the same systems and tactics with you. Here's to standing out in the sea of sparkle. Welcome to episode 287. In today's episode, I'm excited to celebrate my 8-year business anniversary. I launched Joya in May 2016, just after relocating to Los Angeles. And at the start, it was just a basic website and a big dream. I began as, a glorified marketing copywriter, and I did gather a small group of clients, primarily jewelry businesses, helping them with product descriptions and storytelling, but also in the midst of that, and by necessity, also advising them on their marketing activities. I've touched on my journey in a few previous podcast episodes, but I never really delved deeply, mostly because I thought it wasn't that interesting. You see, there are consultants and thought leaders out there, and you know who I'm talking about, with the dramatic, almost cinematic stories of staggering transformations or extraordinary rags to riches journeys. Maybe they hit complete rock bottom and then transform their lives and businesses to ultimately make millions of dollars and be a hero to everyone. And that is really awesome. But frankly, my story isn't like that at all. And in the past, I've been hesitant to share because I just felt like it lacked that Hollywood drama. But I have to say, 8 years into running my business, my confidence has grown significantly in both my capabilities and in the narrative of my journey. And this confidence really kind of makes me feel more eager to share, so that hopefully I can empower others who might also feel that their stories aren't headline grabbing because they didn't make their first piece of jewelry atop Mount Everest or something like that. And maybe you're out there thinking you haven't yet achieved a more quote unquote conventional definition of success. So you're not really sure how to hype your business up in your storytelling. And lately, I've really been reflecting on this idea that while sensational stories might capture some people's attention, there are others out there who are definitely looking for those tales that resonate more quietly with what reality is like, with what the norm is like. They want those more understated but equally powerful stories where maybe the triumph unfolds subtly. And I think that my story is one of those genuine yet relatable narratives. So today I'm choosing to celebrate and share it, and I'm hoping it resonates with those of you who might think your own stories aren't scripted for the silver screen. But before we get to the solid gold, I'd like to take a moment to remind you that this podcast has both audio and video, so you can either listen on your favorite podcast platform or watch on YouTube by searching Joya. You can support the podcast for free by taking the time not only to subscribe, but also to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. All right, let's get into today's episode, my sparklers. As I said, I want to talk about my 8-year business story, not because I want to hijack this episode and make it all about me, but for the listeners out there, maybe you, who just don't resonate with those insane transformations. And my hope is that this one may inspire you in a relatable way and may help you see new ways to tell your story or to find the interesting pieces that maybe don't seem so glamorous or earth-shattering. All right, so back in 2015, I was working at a cashier at a museum store in Jersey City, New Jersey, where I lived at the time. It was a slow Sunday afternoon. I was really bored sitting at the register, and I found myself tearing off pieces of blank receipt paper and just doodling on them to pass the time because there were no customers around. And I know this sounds kind of cliche, but it was really this period of my life where I was having that like quarter life crisis going on. And I'm sitting there bored out of my mind, pondering the big question, what am I going to do with my life? Because I really didn't want to be working as a cashier at a museum store for the rest of my days, especially on a bored Sunday afternoon. I was 30 at that point. Up until then, everything had felt like a series of interesting but unfocused attempts. And at 30, I felt kind of behind my peers, many of whom had found their way into careers and were quote unquote moving on up. And I was sitting there drawing these cartoonish flowers on the receipt paper. And I swear to you, I'm not making this up. This is not just like some, element of the story I'm trying to tell. But that Sunday afternoon, out of almost nowhere, the words jewelry marketing popped into my head. It wasn't a path I had consciously considered before, but for some reason in that moment where I'm just running through all these thoughts and almost in a meditative state, doodling on a piece of receipt paper, it kind of hit me. And I wrote those words down on the receipt paper and tucked it into my pocket just as a customer was approaching the register. So how in the world did I come to that realization? It probably seems very random, especially since you don't know my background and story. It wasn't as completely random as it may seem. Like it struck me like a bolt of lightning. At that time, in addition to being a cashier, I was juggling multiple other jobs in retail. And also in addition to retail, no exaggeration, I was a part-time lecturer at Rutgers University teaching creative writing, simultaneously teaching at, I think, 2 to 3 other community colleges and universities. On top of that, I was also freelancing, mostly in copywriting for marketing, and occasionally working on project-to-project basis at marketing agencies, handling tasks like SEO and research. Yeah. As you can imagine, it was a really hectic period in my life, a lot of which was shaped by the aftermath of the 2009 market crash and just a turbulent time in the economy, as well as in the publishing industry, which was actually the field I had dreamed of entering after graduation. But at that period, if you remember, so many print publications were folding like all at once. And all of a sudden, this rise of digital media, of social media, of online sharing, of self-publishing, all these things were totally upheaving the world of book publishing and transforming it to a place that had just never been like that before. And even though my resume up until then had been stacked with publishing internships, bursting with writing experience, like I had been that type A overachiever trying to build my resume so that I could get the type of job I wanted. When I graduated, I had trouble getting any entry-level job in the publishing space. And in this chaotic environment, I felt like I had to kind of piece together a living, doing whatever I could with whatever skills and interests I could, hence all of these like cobbled together jobs until a clearer path emerged, because that's like all I felt like I could do at the time. And it meant I had to adopt a hustler lifestyle, especially because, I don't know, in my mid-20s, I didn't really want to live at home with my parents. I wanted to be independent. I wanted to have my own life. And so I had to kind of do whatever it took to get there. And it meant having like this insane resume of all these different things I was doing. So as I said, one of the jobs I had, I was working part-time at Rutgers. And eventually, after a few years, an opportunity presented itself that I was so excited about. It was a full-time lecturer position in creative writing. I realized during my time at Rutgers, I loved working with students. It kind of had become a new dream job for me. And when I got the opportunity, I was, wow, okay, I get state benefits. I get this flexible and manageable workload. I get the ability to share my passion for writing with students. And it also, since I didn't have to hustle so much, all of these other jobs at the same time, it gave me the opportunity to be creative, to write, to do freelancing if I wanted to. A lot of diverse things outside of that full-time position. But the catch was, of course, it couldn't be everything. It was a year-to-year position that was just dependent on budget availability. So almost too good to be true. And of course, after a year, there were a ton of departmental changes and funding cuts. And that just meant that the position I had secured for one academic year was no longer secure. And I was just kind of tired. Like, I was really sick of trying to piece together this life and also feeling like I was so reliant on other people, on the economy, on, whatever external things were happening around me, that it caused me to really think, okay, what do I want to do? Where do I want to be? And what do I want my life to look like? I think until that point, I had kind of let other people and other factors decide that for me. But I was taking control and trying to more intentionally figure out what I wanted to do. And I also, at this time, had this inexplicable pull toward Los Angeles. It was a place I had visited and just seemed so magical to me, especially as someone who is kind of prone to seasonal depression. And I was just sick of commuting to all of these multiple jobs in the winter time with the snow and the inclement weather. And all of that just wasn't doing it for me anymore. And so my boyfriend and I at the time, we decided it was time for a big change, and we were both on the same page about moving cross country to Los Angeles, which in retrospect was kind of just like a crazy idea. But anyway, so despite my love for teaching and the love I had for this job at Rutgers and enjoying working with students, it just didn't seem sustainable to keep pursuing it unless I wanted to commit to more postgraduate study. And I wasn't sure I wanted to have many more years of hustling and scraping by and being on a student's budget. I just knew that if I was going to figure something out on my own and kind of carve my own path, I did know my interests, thank goodness. I knew I loved writing. I knew I loved digital media. I knew I loved marketing. I knew I loved jewelry and fashion. And I don't know, maybe it was just my 20-something optimism, but I was like, why not? Why couldn't I make something out of that? I had no doubt in my mind that I could figure it out. So I guess it did make sense in a way that on that Sunday afternoon, I would come up with the term jewelry marketing and write it on the back of a receipt while I was daydreaming. So it wasn't completely random in retrospect. But of course, to move to Los Angeles, I had to save money. I had to make a plan with that boyfriend I had. I did temporarily have to stay with my parents and ramp up my freelancing efforts again. I got a few retail gigs, and one of those was actually a job at a mall jewelry store, which I intentionally tried to get because I wanted to test out this idea of wanting to go into jewelry. I mean, I knew I loved it as a shopper and as a spectator, but I wanted to work at a jewelry store to make sure I liked working with it. I liked the product and talking about the product and educating customers and working with customers. And it totally did. It solidified my passion for this path I had made up for myself, literally with ink on paper. And I loved working in that jewelry store. I loved seeing the emotional responses that customers had for buying jewelry. I loved helping them find a treat for themselves or a gift for a loved one. And I also had a lot of amazing opportunities to study more about diamonds and fine jewelry. And that gave me a lot of knowledge and experience. So yes, we did finally make it to Los Angeles in 2016. And upon arriving, that's when I set up my joya.com website and set up shop there as the freelance writer and consultant for the jewelry industry. But of course, I needed a job. So I pursued marketing roles in the jewelry industry while also expanding my freelance work and trying to bring on clients. And my first job in LA was I managed to secure a part-time position at a diamond wedding jewelry company downtown. And I have to say, even though I was like kind of on the path I intended and I was like working toward that dream, those initial months on the other side of the country were really hard, especially after my relationship with that boyfriend ended. And I was in this place where I didn't really know anyone except for the few people I had met through my new job or through people that my boyfriend and I had kind of met together. And then, of course, we weren't splitting like living and food expenses anymore. And so the financial and social pressure were all on me all of a sudden, derailing me off that part of the plan. And my ex decided to move back to the East Coast. So suddenly I was alone in this new city. Of course, I was tempted to leave. I mean, it was kind of crazy. But I think ultimately, even though I was scared and it was really difficult, I saw better opportunities in Los Angeles for this fresh start that I had in mind in jewelry and fashion. And so I decided to give myself a chance and try to carve out this path. Of course, it was not easy. Even at times, I had to put my jewelry marketing dream on hold because I had to just try to get any job I could to make ends meet and pay the bills. As I'm sure you can imagine, Los Angeles is a very expensive place to live. And so I had to kind of go back a little bit to that hustler mindset that I was trying to put aside. But thankfully, I knew how to be a hustler. And so I made it work for me. I even had to work in marketing in other sectors like education, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it wasn't aligned with what I had originally wanted to do. And so in that way, just trying to survive, really, I felt like I had somewhat strayed from my original vision. And that was also frustrating to me. But I felt a little bit between a rock and a hard place because I needed to eat. I needed to have a roof over my head. I had this dream, how was I going to make this all work? I did have Joya. I had those few clients that I was freelancing for, like under the umbrella of Joya, but I wasn't yet fully committed to it because it wasn't fully paying the bills for me. And the last real job I had in LA before I took the leap, it was at a jewelry business in West Hollywood. And when I landed that job, it just felt like, all right, now I'm on the path. I'm finally back on course. It was this beautiful office that doubled as a showroom and design space, complete with elegant mood boards and chic employees. Everything you could kind of imagine when you think of glam Los Angeles jewelry brand. It really seemed perfect. And at least from what I could tell, upon being hired, the business was thriving. I was so excited about the learning opportunities that it presented to me. But the reality of working there was very different. As I think a lot of people can relate to that, the idea of a job versus what happens at the actual job. I found myself idly twiddling my thumbs at my computer each day, wondering why had I been hired at all? Because the marketing director was so controlling in a way that she rarely allowed me to help with anything, even the ones she clearly needed help with, because she just always seemed so overwhelmed and stressed. And despite my efforts to get involved, offering myself to literally anything they needed and seeking to learn more about the business and the customers, I was largely excluded from anything that I was supposedly hired for. And so that was a deeply disappointing experience because what looked like a dream job on the outside and what appeared like it would put me back on my path, it really felt so isolating and unfulfilling. It's inside. And No surprise, I was laid off after just a few months, during which I think the most significant achievement and task I handled for them was organizing a spreadsheet of social media captions. So, yeah, I remember so clearly the Friday afternoon they told me they no longer needed me on the team. I wasn't really surprised given the situation I had been in, but it still hurt. As I said, this job had seemed like it was the dream, jewelry and marketing, glamorous and exciting from the outside. But there I was feeling sidelined and rejected. And despite knowing I kind of had given it my best effort, it felt really unfair. And I remember driving home that day, literally driving, tears coming down my face. And I stopped at my favorite tea shop, which was this Friday afternoon treat that I had just to be comforted. And I was sitting in the corner of this tea shop, trying not to cry, but I don't know. It wasn't even just that feeling of being laid off, but everything I had kind of tried to struggle to get back on my path, and feeling really like I was doing it on my own. And also at that point, I was past 30, feeling like I'm at a low point in my career. But that moment in the tea shop, that moment, leaving that office on that Friday afternoon, that was a new beginning for me. And in retrospect, I think that was what I needed. That was this cosmic nudge, at least it felt like to me, to finally bet on myself. I was enough is enough. The reason I came to LA, the reason that had pushed me was because I felt like I had no control, that I was just at the mercy of everything happening around me, of the economy, of whatever freelance job was available, of whatever budget was available. And it's just such a disempowering feeling. And I decided on that day that I was going to dedicate myself fully to building this sort of thing I had started, Joya. Again, I had been doing it very part-time since 2016, on the side, at night, on weekends, when I had time. But I did have enough in place at that point that I thought, I can make this work. I knew I didn't have enough to sustain a full-time job and just pay the bills with that. But thankfully, I had my hustler mindset. I had connections with freelancing gigs, and I was just going to piece together the opportunities, fully committing myself to Joya, doing what I needed to pay the bills, but putting my brain fully into the thing that I could control. And that was the best decision I made, but also one of the hardest things that I've willingly put myself through, because I worked very, very long hours on very, very monotonous projects in very, very isolating settings by my own, just countless hours in coffee shops doing repetitive copywriting to make the grind more bearable just by being around the smell of coffee and the buzz of people around me. I was working nights, I was working weekends. I felt like I could barely step away from my work. Again, this feeling like I'm struggling and hustling, but at least in some way, I was kind of taking back the control a little bit to myself. And it would take a long time to get in a place where I could really set the rules and call the shots, but I was moving toward it. And it wasn't great, but I was really motivated, and I had a goal and a single-minded focus at that time. And my goal was never a rags to riches story. I never was looking for that Hollywood silver screen dream, but I just wanted to establish a sustainable business that could provide me a decent living. And I chipped away at that for a while. And thankfully, through COVID, after COVID, by 2021, I had managed to focus on my business, Joya, full time. dropping pretty much all the other BS freelance stuff. And this was a milestone that, to be honest with you, even though it was like a goal and a dream, there was a part of me that it seemed so out of reach and unachievable. And for years, being so dependent on that freelance work, it kind of made the idea of relying solely on my jewelry marketing clients seem so distant. But I did it. And I'm still doing it. There were so many challenges along the way. I struggled with pricing my services. My offerings were scattered. I couldn't always clearly define what I did. The quality of my clients was inconsistent, leading to some difficult relationships. But I persisted without a backup plan. This might seem really dramatic, but I often did and still do say that I don't have a plan B. And my husband always reminds me that that's not true because there's always an alternative. I can always go do something else. But for me, I think having no plan B has been so crucial for my mindset because it kind of prevents me from giving up on my dream when times get tough, things get hard, I get upset about something. There were so many opportunities for me to settle for a job that didn't align with my goals. And I did do that a bunch of times. And then the universe kind of pushed me out of it because it didn't work out. There were so many times I could have moved back to New Jersey for the comfort of being near my family. But sticking to my plan A, even through the hardest times, that's what brought me to where I am today. And even today, every day, working on my business feels like navigating new challenges all the time. But honestly, that is the greatest gift of entrepreneurship, especially for someone like me who loves learning. There's always something new to discover. And I find myself waking up each day eager to tackle the next challenge and continue forging my path. And there's no way in heck that I could have done this alone. And the cool thing is that as Joya grows, the teamwork aspect, it takes a village aspect becomes even more crucial. Over the years, I've had coaches and employees who have supported me in shaping my mindset, refining the strategy, handling the day-to-day operations needed to satisfy our clients. And we're now a team of 6 at Joya, and I can't imagine not having this support. But there was a time that even the thought of hiring one employee was like beyond daunting to me. And now they're just indispensable. It's like having 5 additional brains to complement my own. And as I said, running a business is profoundly challenging. No matter how much I get it to a place that I feel really good about, it often demands significant sacrifice and an ongoing tolerance for uncertainty. And even though I don't have this dramatic transformation story, I think the quieter moments, all the time I've spent struggling with self-doubt, so much time. But building self-confidence, working through those doubts, recognizing my potential, leveraging my potential, staying committed to my dreams, seizing opportunities when they appear, being consistent in how I present myself and showing up. All those things have taught me invaluable lessons about sustainable growth, strategic clarity, and resilience. And the cool thing is, the thing that really excites me is that I'm only 8 years in, and I've already grown so much, not just as a business owner, but as a person. And I can't wait for all the ways that my story will grow and evolve. And hopefully in another 8 years, I'll be able to add more layers of nuance and richness to the narrative I tell about this journey. And I think that my perspective also shows in the clients that we attract and really love to work with. Obviously, I know because of what I have been through and struggled with internally in my mind and my soul, I know from experience how hard it is to grow a business. And I know from that hands-on experience that Hollywood-worthy transformations and explosive results are far from the norm. And so we also love to work with clients that have similar goals. They want to build sustainable businesses for the long term and do so in a strategic, manageable way. They have a mission and a vision, and they want to chip away at bringing that to a larger audience. And with our clients, we demonstrate that, getting them to sustainable growth and operational efficiency. And no, we haven't taken a business from zero to millions, but we have guided many towards feeling successful and maximizing the potential they have. And that's the path I advocate for, because that's the path that I myself have walked. One of almost stubborn dedication, hard but smart work, following and sticking to a clear strategy, and the willingness to make meaningful, impactful sacrifices. And the story that I've experienced over the past 8 years has shaped Joya's values when it comes to client relationships in a really major way. And I want to be transparent about where I come from, like I am in this episode, to attract like-minded people more. And so that's a big reason why I'm reflecting on this today and sharing it with you. So I want to know, what's your business journey story? What were some of the most pivotal moments you've had in that journey? Let me know in a comment on YouTube or DM me on Instagram. I'd love to chat about it. Okay, let's get into the gold mine. This is a segment of the podcast where I get personal and share insights on entrepreneurship, mindset, success, growth, and all things business. In this week's gold mine, I want to share a quick thought on storytelling, especially for those of you who might find it challenging. I know it's such a common struggle, and I know that because some of my most popular podcast episodes and YouTube videos focus on brand storytelling. So I was recently listening to this other podcast called How I Built This, which features really incredible entrepreneurial stories. And they've introduced this segment called Advice Line, where small business owners from all around the world discuss their challenges, and then they receive advice from previous podcast guests. And in this one recent episode, the founder of a coffee business shared his struggle with storytelling. And so the hosts are like, okay, well, tell us a little bit about your business. And as he began to describe his childhood on a coffee farm in Honduras, he painted such a vivid, emotional picture that it took everyone aback, even me as I was listening. Like, wow, okay. And the guest advisor totally responded with surprise, basically reading my mind, highlighting, wait, how can you say you're not a good storyteller? The story you literally just told us was so captivating. And it made us all realize, and even him, that he was a great storyteller. And he shouldn't say that he's not a good storyteller. The real issue is that he hadn't figured out how to apply his skills strategically to his business. The authentic story was there. He just needed to figure out how to leverage it. And this just made me think, listening to him, that many of you out there are probably already great storytellers too, especially when you're talking about things that excite you and hold deep meaning for you. And admittedly, as I said earlier, I still feel self-conscious about my own business story. It doesn't have that dramatic flair of a classic rags to riches tale, and it's not glamorous, but it is genuine and significant to me. And it's taken me 8 years to understand and appreciate the parts of it that have shaped me and my values as a service provider to my clients. And so what I want to remind you is that storytelling often requires distance and perspective. In your first year of business, you may not have much to tell, but your story will develop and deepen over time. And that's why it's crucial to revisit and retell your story, because it evolves and becomes richer with each telling. And so when it comes to storytelling, Try to be less critical and more patient with yourself. Good stories can't be forced. They really can't. They unfold naturally through this process we call life. So keep engaging with your business passionately and purposefully, and the story will continue to emerge. You just need to nurture it thoughtfully as it grows and changes. So what do you think? Have you found that the longer you're in business, the more perspective you get on your story? Or even the more confident you feel leveraging your story? Let me know in an Instagram DM or YouTube comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did you have any questions about today's episode? You can always email me, Larissa, that's LARYSSA @joyjoya.com. If you love this podcast, please share it with a friend who'd appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe as well as leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If you're completely new to digital marketing, then you'll want to purchase and read a copy of my book, Jewelry Marketing Joy. Visit joyjoya.com/book for more information.